In this video, we'll be discussing what are some of the survivor-centric measures that can be taken in order to curb and tackle economic violence. Considering that economic violence often plays a huge role in not just encouraging but also maintaining structural inequities and skewed power structures, it is important to focus our conversations on how we can address and fight against economic control. Number one is to reposition financial institutions as allies. Financial institutions such as insurance and banking companies often adopt discriminatory policies which can make access to financial resources difficult for women and other marginalized communities. Access to banking and financial institutions is crucial for sustainable long-term redressal. Access to banking and financial institutions is crucial for sustainable long-term redressal. Some of the methods that can be adopted to ensure that survivors to have accessibility to financial resources include: Number one, offer affordable checking and savings accounts. Number two, keep survivors' information confidential and secure. Number three, implement enhanced fraud protections on survivors' accounts. And number four, offer survivor safety accounts. It's also important to designate internal teams to handle survivor accounts, allow survivors to open bank accounts with ID and address alternatives, offer interest-free deferred payment emergency loans, and flexible repayment plans for survivors who are in default. It also might help to provide survivor paid leave and other resources to employees, have a small business loan system that can help finance independent projects undertaken by survivors, and in cases of contingency or emergency, access should not be denied and systems can be put into place for easy and efficient access. Number two, I think recognizing women's economic acumen can go a long way in making this approach survivor-centered. Often women are not seen as having the requisite financial acumen required to make key financial decisions. This belief has guided several discriminatory policies. In some places, women can't own property, they're not equally educated, and too often they're forced into marriages and motherhood too soon. These gaps and barriers must be taken into account and intentionally combated when providing financial products and services, as the account access and usage data continue to show us that women lag behind men. These biases continue to exist despite women continuing to prove themselves as more reliable repayers and are also associated with lower credit risks. And next, I think employing more women and queer people in financial services can also go a long way in ensuring that these are survivor-centric measures. In certain markets, clients may feel more comfortable interacting with banking agents who share in their identities. What's also important is a real commitment to serving women and queer clients at all levels of institution and promoting gender diversity among staff, including at leadership levels. It may be useful for banks in developing countries to consider what's holding them from joining the workforce. Example, fear of theft for banking agents who travel a lot, an apprehension of being discriminated against, or a lack of acceptance from the clients of the institution. After which, I think recognizing different needs of the survivors when developing services is a very integral part of building survivor-centric measures. Not all survivors' needs are the same, and a range of banking options need to be available for those who may need access to finances for different things such as education, healthcare, housing facilities, as well as business and vehicular loans to ensure that survivors are able to choose from a plethora of these options. Rosita Najmi, a program officer from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, cited this statement. Some actionable steps for other different stakeholders involved can be very integral again to secure survivor-centric ideologies. Number one, it's very important to note what kind of role governmental agencies can have. It is imperative that any policy seeking to address domestic violence includes and acknowledges the effects of economic abuse. Any policy that seeks to empower survivors must ensure that it tackles certain root causes such as illiteracy, poverty, early childhood marriage, creating an unemployment insurance scheme which would assist survivors in ensuring there is economic sustainability even in the event of unemployment, among others. Additionally, the government can support and fund organizations that are engaged in these activities, especially sometimes during a COVID-19 pandemic, which would have marked effects on the funding capacities of such institutions. Many survivors are dependent on these projects, and the lack of funding may adversely affect their capacity to aid and assist. Next, community led initiatives are essential in ensuring that survivors are able to integrate the society at large and not feel isolated. Many organizations provide access to healthcare, including medical, mental, and physical healthcare and legal advice. Additionally, they also provide shelter and accommodation. Other organizations also work on ensuring that the survivor can financially sustain themselves and focus on imparting skill based education, developing an entrepreneurial spirit, among others. Next up, we have, and lastly, most importantly, the employer's role. As mentioned above, discussions around emotional abuse require a nuanced discussion primarily since the circumstances and experiences of the survivors may vary. Employees can also be subjected to economic violence outside of the workplace that employers can intervene to address. Some of these measures can include recognizing the adverse impact of domestic violence on survivors and providing adequate support to them in the form of paid leaves, cash transfers, and microloans. Offering and covering expenses of legal and financial costs that survivors may have to undertake to find protection against economic violence is an incredibly important thing that an employer can think about. Lastly, offering alternative housing options and access to financial assistance and planning services to employees at subsidized rates can go in a long way.